Okay, today I'm going to go over a Photoshop technique that requires working with masks and things like that, and that's a technique that I use if I want to illustrate in a way that seems kind of similar to Illustrator, but I'd rather work in Photoshop. Sometimes this can be really advantageous because you can kind of work a little quicker in Photoshop this way sometimes, and then you have better access to raster images. So if you're working with texture images, things like that, or if you want to switch back and forth between working this way and working with an organic paintbrush, it's just a little bit more flexible sometimes. So, it's a workflow that you can kind of experiment with here. And so to start things off, I'll create a new layer here. And so normally when you think of Photoshop, you think of using the brush tool and pinning in your shapes like that. And a lot of artists, instead of using the brush tool, will use a combination of the lasso tool and the pen tool. And when you use the lasso tool, and the shortcut for it is L here, you can kind of draw in a shape here and close it off, and then it makes a selection right there. So let me just kind of draw in an initial shape right here. And once it makes the selection here, you can tell it has a selection because of the dotted line. And if I press B for brush, no matter where I press, even if I press out here, I can only fill in the area where the selection is made right there. And then when you're done, you can press Command D or go to select and then deselect right there. And then you have your shape. And you can just continue to kind of carve things out. And additionally, I could use the eraser tool for this new selection. So I pressed E for eraser and erase right there. Press Command D to deselect. And you can kind of work almost like paper cutouts here. The lasso tool is incredibly simple and it's really quick to use. You just make selections real quick and it'll just do it for you right away here. And then if you press Command D, it's gone. And so the lasso tool is an incredibly quick way to work. And the trick with it, generally speaking, is that it kind of it draws wherever your pen goes. So if you have a little bit of an unsteady hand or something like that, it's hard to get like a really exact straight line out of it, some things like that. So it's always going to have like that handmade feel to it a little bit when you're using it. You see I was kind of concentrating on getting a straight line right there, but you can see as my hand wavered, it catches it there. So there's kind of a pro and con with the lasso tool. The pro being it's fast, the con being if you need a really straight line, that it might not be the best one. So to have more control, I use the pen tool, so shortcut P. And the pen tool, there's just works a lot like the pen tool in Illustrator. There's just a few differences here. When you're using the pen tools, you can use path or shape right here as these two options here. I like to work in the path, and the path is a way you can make a selection similar to the lasso tool, and then the shape will create a shape like one of these right here, like the rectangular ellipse tool here, where you draw it out and it almost works like Illustrator, where you have a shape that you can fill in right there, and you can have a fill and a stroke. And honestly, the shape technique could make a lot of sense for this technique if you want to work that way, but just my personal workflow, I tend to work with path here. So the way to work with the path tool here, you have the pen tool right here, or P, and you click, and if you click and hold, you get Beziers, so exactly like Illustrator. So you can click and hold. And I'm pressing spacebar right here to move my anchor point around, so if I just click on it, it's not going to move the anchor point. It will move the Beziers, but it won't move the anchor point. And if you want to move the anchor point, just hold down spacebar. And, oops. And I guess you need to hold down the anchor point while you're first drawing it. If you've already drawn in the anchor point, then what you need to do in Photoshop, which is, again, this is unlike Illustrator, so this is the main area where this is unlike Illustrator, is I have to hold Command. So hold Command on your keyboard, and you can move your anchor point around after the fact. So just to kind of say that again, to be clear here, is you can click and hold and start dragging around to get this Bezier to change the line here. And as long as you've first drawn in your anchor point, you can hold the space bar and reposition it. But if you let go, then you need to hold the command button, and then you can move your anchor point around after the fact here. And you have a lot of control with this tool here. If you don't want a curved line, what we have here, you can just click and get these hard edges right here. You see, so I have these curved and hard edges. And at any point, if, for instance, this curve right here is a little too abrupt for my taste, so I can just hold Command here, click on that, and while holding Command, readjust my Bezier to have a different shape to it here. So with the pen tool, just like the lasso tool, you're trying to, it won't kind of make the selection until you bring it back to this point right here, your starting point here. So I'll just bring it back, and you can see my pen tool has a little O at the bottom right, so that allows me to close it off there. After the fact, with the pen tool, kind of adjusting it's a little clumsy once you've closed off the loop here, but you can see under the pen tool we have these different functions right here. So we have like the free transform pen tool, we have the add and subtract. So if I want to add a new anchor point, I can click on it right there and then hold Command and reposition it there. Additionally, if I want to subtract an anchor point under the pen tool, I can delete an anchor point here. Let's see here, so I can just click there and delete it. Again, you see how that Bezier changes? This is something that's a little clumsy with the Photoshop version here. But you can see this anchor point got kind of closed out. So if I want to re-expand it and kind of get it curvy like these other lines again, you click on this convert point tool right here, so it looks like a little upside down V right there. If you click on that, you can expand it out and regain control of it, and then if I hold Command, I can reposition it here. So you can adjust this after the fact here, after you've closed it off. One more thing here with this tool, the convert point tool right there, is you see how this curve is, this has a lot of curve to it. If I want that to be a straight edge, using this tool right here, I can just click on the anchor point and bam, it turns into a hard edge here. So using that tool, you can either reconfigure your Beziers, or you can just click and create these hard points right there. So there's a lot of control you can make while adjusting it here. And so what this is it's called a work path, and it's still editable here. So the reason it's called a work path is, you know, we can continue to work on this path that's being made here. And so in order to make this a selection that we can paint in, we need to do another step first. And so that step is, if you go to under this panel right here, you should see layers, channels, and paths here. And so you can see under paths, that last third tab right there, we have the work path, which was created right there. And so what I do here is let me first make a new layer here. So sorry about that. I just wanted to make a new layer. So under paths, in the work path, I'll right click where it says work path here. So you can right click and then go down to make selection right there. And you'll basically just press OK. If you want this to have a feathered edge, then you can give it a feather by typing in the number of pixels feather you want, but I want it to be 0, so I'll press OK. And you can see it now made a selection right there. And to work this way, or this technique that I'm going to show, what I like to do is I like to work purely in silhouettes, working in black and white first to create masks for Photoshop, and then I'll create color from there. And so to start this thing off, I'm going to switch over to my black color right there. It's my main color right here. I'll go back to my layer, and I have this new layer here, and I'll call this mask. And I'll click on my brush tool, and I'll fill in the shape right here. And then press Command. If I need to deselect this, I can press Command D right there, and it's deselected. And a lot of the times I'll kind of make a silhouette using, or a shape, sorry, using this kind of silhouette technique here. And I can use a combination of the lasso tool and the pen tool here, depending on how exact or inexact I want the area to be here. So right there I used the lasso tool, so I pressed L, made the selection right here, and I can paint that in. Press Command D to deselect. Or if I want to continue to use the pen tool, I can just click on the pen tool and make sure that it's on the main pen tool here. And I can start kind of fiddling around with making another shape here. And notice that with the pen tool, you can get really quick with it once you get used to it. So if you feel an aversion to it, I would recommend that you just stay patient with it and kind of keep going with it, because it gives you a ton of control, and it's really important in design, no matter which program you're using, to kind of have this accessible to you here. So you can see there I made my work path, and I could continue to adjust this, right, by clicking on the pen tool, toggling it down, and either adding, subtracting anchor points, or converting some of these anchor points to just continue to adjust them here using this tool right here. And I can continue to adjust it. And so once I have that in a work path into a shape that I like, I can go under the Paths tab right here, right click, go to Make Selection, press OK. Now it's made a selection here, and I'll press the B for the brush, and I'll fill it in. And then when I'm done, I'll press Command D. And let me just use the pen tool one more time real quick, just to kind of continue to make this shape. I'm going to make some kind of abstract animal here or something. So I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. Command D. And I'll make one more hind leg using the pen tool. Oops. And I can press the command button to move the whole thing as well if all the anchor points are kind of selected like this. Right click, make selection. Okay. Press the brush. Okay, so I have a silhouette here. I could also subtract out of this as well using the pen tool. So if I want to cut out the eye or something like that, right there, I'm just using the pen tool to create that shape. I'm under the Work Paths menu, right click, make selection, create the selection. Instead of using the brush tool, I'm just using the eraser tool by pressing E, or this tool right here, and you can erase it out. Press Command D, and you can get like a pretty, how do you say this, customized silhouette that you can really get a lot of control over and have kind of a lot of freedom to work here pretty quickly. And so the reason that I made this black and white here is I like to do this using masks. And the reason I like to use masks will become clear here in a second. So it kind of adds a step right now, but it's going to save a lot of time down the road here. And so you see here we have layers, channels, and paths. So under channels, this is where Photoshop divides up RGB, red, green, and blue channels. And so if I were to have a full color image, let me just open up a full color image so I could just show this. Just give it 1 second. So we have this matte painting here, and if I go under the channels menu, let's just kind of look at this. So we have right here, we have, if this were to be, so we have the RGB right here, and so if everything's selected, it'll kind of show up correctly here. And this is kind of the area where the greens are showing up in the image. This is kind of a balanced image, so it's a little hard to kind of see it, but we have the red, the green, and the blues divided up, which all have slight differences here. This would probably be better illustrated if I used a more graphic image there, but looking back at this image here, since this is black and white, all of these look exactly the same, right? So I'm trying to create a mask, and so I can just right click on any of these, it doesn't matter which one it is, and I can just right click and duplicate the channel and press OK. And what I like to call this is, I just like to name it I might call this mask 1. And in order to make this a mask that works here, there's a couple more steps I need to do, but this happens really rapidly once you get used to it here. I'm talking through it, so it takes a little time, but it's a quick process here once you get the handle of it. So first thing I need to do is, the way masks work is the areas that are black are hidden and the areas that are white will show through when you paint on it. So I need to invert this, what I have right here. So all you need to do is press Command I, or go to Image, Adjustments, and invert right there, and it'll switch it there for us. So our image is now white on black there. So we have our mask prepared. Let me create a new layer just so we have it here. And so notice here how I'm in my layer menu and I hid my mask layer right there, so I have a white image right now. And so if I go back to my channels menu, you see my RGB, red, green, and blue are all white, but my mask still remains as a full-fledged image right here, because I kind of made that mask and it's saved, and if I save this Photoshop file as a PSD, that'll be stored there, and I'll have access to this mask at any point in the future as long as I work on this file here. So it's kind of set in stone as an asset that's available to me here. And so here I have a new blank layer, and I'll call this just Paint 1. And going back to the channels menu, I just need to select my mask. I need to press this button right here, which makes it loads the channel as selection, and so that's just a fancy way of saying that it selects my mask for me right here. So it makes this into a selection. So I'll click that, and you can see the selections happening there. I'll go over to my layers menu, click on my paint layer that I just created right here, and press this button right here, which is a rectangle with a circle in it, and I'll add a layer mask right there. And so when you look at it, it doesn't appear to have done anything, but we'll see that it did here in just a moment. So the way this works here is, this is the mask that was added to the layer, and then this is the layer itself, and you can paint on either the mask if the bracket is there, or you can paint on the layer if the bracket is there. So I'll click on the mask and then I'll double click on it, and you can see that I have a mask that is attached to this layer here. And so now if I were to take a, let's just take a bright red brush, and I were to click the bracket so that I'm now on the layer, and I were to paint over here, it doesn't do anything. But if I paint, I'm on the eraser tool, let's see here, press B. So if I were to paint over here, it wouldn't do anything. But if I paint in the area where the mask is, oh, I'm sorry, my brush switched on me there. If I were to paint here where the mask is, so you see if I paint over here with a brush and I'm on my layer, you can see the bracket is right there, that it doesn't show up, but as soon as I paint into where the mask is, it'll show up for me here. So I can paint this in, and I now have a layer that I can kind of paint organically, and no matter what, I can't paint outside of it. So if I want to kind of switch it up and use like a lighter blue and switch to, let's just say I want to switch to like my gouache brush here, something like that, I can paint in here and I can't paint outside of it. And so you can kind of get some really cool organic kind of looks here using this mask. And it kind of frees you up a lot while you're painting to kind of work as you like here. And I don't have to worry if my brush is going outside of the canvas or anything like that. It's just going to automatically get in there. So let me just switch over to a marker brush and fill this thing in for real. And additionally, while you're doing this, so you can kind of get like a little bit of organic flavor kind of going on with this. So additionally, I can hide this layer. I can make a new layer, and I'll call this Paint 2. Oops, if I can spell. And I'll just do this process one more time with the same mask here. So I'll go back to Channels. I will turn on my mask layer, and you can see everything looks red right now. So I need to hide all my RGBs here. So I'm going to hide them real quick. I have my mask. I'm going to select my mask by pressing this button right here, the circle. So you can see the dotted line is there, so the selection has been made. I'm going to go ahead and turn all these back on and turn the mask off again. Go to my layers menu. Now I have this paint layer 2, and I'm going to apply the mask to there. And so now I have a whole nother layer where I can just kind of keep working in new layers on top of this. So let's just say, for instance, I wanted to just experiment with some different colors, but I wasn't totally sure about it. I could just continue to here we go. And you see I'm making sure that the layer menu is selected right here. And I need to switch colors, obviously, so I'll switch to some kind of teal color. And I can continue to kind of paint in my character object here, and then I'm limited to this zone, which is great. And so that's kind of the heart of the technique here. So you can kind of build up shapes this way, and you can continue to kind of build up your mask library down here as you work, which can be really helpful for creating graphic looks. A lot of times I think it's totally okay just to work in one layer. I just wanted to show that you could keep kind of coming back to the well with this mask and having several different layers here with the same mask applied to it. And the advantage of that is, the advantage of that is that, for instance, if I want to hide this layer or try a different overlay mode with it, right there, try different opacities, I have kind of more flexibility to continue to mess with this here. In addition to this technique here, something I want to talk about is grouping. So if you do work with multiple layers here, you can work in groups, which is this button right here. And so I just need to hold Shift, select both of these layers, and I can press Command G, or I can press this button right here. And this turns all my layers into a single group right here. And so now I can easily select them both by just clicking on the group folder, and I can press Command and T, or Edit, Free Transform right here. And I can move the whole thing around as one right here, or scale it in or scale it out right here, which is great. But in addition to it just being a little easier to select and all that stuff, one thing that's nice about grouping it here is adjustment layers. So I'm going to kind of add a quick thing about adjustment layers into this. So let me fill in my background. So I made a new blank layer here, and I'm going to press G, or the paint bucket tool, which is right here, to fill in the background. I don't really like the way that color is looking, so let's experiment with this for another second here. Okay, so I have my background, I'll call this the fill layer. And as anyone knows who takes my class, I like to work with adjustment layers a lot here. So if I were to do an adjustment layer is a way to kind of change the colors of a layer while working non-destructively on it. And the way it works is you click on this little Ghostbusters button right here, you click on it, and you have this assortment of different effects you can do. So you can change brightness, contrast, levels, curves, all these are really helpful. I'll do hue saturation because that's the one that's kind of the easiest to kind of show how it's working here. So I'll do hue saturation, and you can see it creates this adjustment layer right here. And the way an adjustment layer works is any changes you make here will be applied to any of these layers that are underneath it. However, so let me just show that real quick. So you can see in the hue saturation, I'm shifting the hues of the entire painting here, and I can just kind of experiment with different color combinations. And as you can see, it not only changed the group, but it changed the fill layer right there. It changes the whole image right now. But an advantage of me grouping all my painting layers together into a group is now if on this adjustment layer, if I double click on this button right here and pull the adjustment layer back up again, is if I press this button right here, it makes it so the adjustment layer only affects whatever layer or group is directly underneath it. So since I group these together, it'll affect the group. And so I'll click this button, and you can see now that this is not affecting the fill background color anymore. It's only affecting my character that I started to create here. And within this character, I could continue to add new layers right here, and as long as it's in the group, you can see I have a blue color, but since it's within this this same group right here, the adjustment layer is affecting it right there. So let me be clear on that, because I'll paint outside here. So this new painting layer right here is in this group, and since it's in the group, my point is that this adjustment layer will affect it, but not the background right there. So some painters really like to, or digital painters like to just work in a really simple composition and keep it to either one layer or maybe 3 layers or something like that. And sometimes I like to work that way, particularly if I'm going for a really painterly look without any strict hard edges or anything like that. But with this particular technique, when I'm working with mask, I really do like to just break it out and stay organized here, but keep a lot of layers going at the same time. And something that's nice about this technique here is with the adjustment layer, if I decide I don't like it, I can just turn it off, and I didn't lose anything with my painting here. And additionally, since I took the time to create the mask, I have that mask down here in the library, so at any point I can kind of go back and use that cutout that I made and have access to it and reuse it as needed throughout this composition here.